Welcome to another Monday Blitz. As I've been reading through the book of 1 Samuel in these weekly devotionals, nearly every chapter has surprised me. There's been something in there that I wasn't expecting or haven't noticed, or sometimes just haven't taken the time to think about the impact of what that would mean, not only to the people back then experiencing it, but also for my life, what that would mean. As I was considering this chapter that we look at this time today, there's a question that comes to my mind. And that question is, what if God asked you to do something that seems to be in opposition to God's overall plan, his purpose? Because here Samuel is, there in chapter 9, Samuel is being asked by God to anoint a king. And God even tells him who it is he's going to anoint. He's going to anoint this king that doesn't fit any of what Samuel knows to be right. In fact, the guy he anoints king, Saul, seems clueless to what's even going on in the spiritual realm. His servant has to inform him of what it is that is taking place. And so it seems like, why, God, would you choose this guy? He's not a Levite. He's not from the tribe of Judah, so he's not a spiritual leader. He doesn't fall into the category of chosen by God as the firstborn. Instead, he comes from the tribe of Benjamin. There is nothing about Saul that fits the narrative that seems to have been played out up to this point, and yet God tells Samuel clearly, this is the man. The only thing Saul had going for him, the only thing was he apparently was very tall and he was attractive. Why would Samuel choose to follow this instruction that seems to go against God's plan and anoint Saul? What kind of relationship did Samuel have to have with God to trust the voice of God enough to anoint Samuel? We would probably really struggle. I know I personally would really struggle with the idea, I'm going to anoint Saul king. This doesn't fit the overall plan God has. I can't see where it fits in. Why would I anoint someone who God has not chosen? And yet God says, this guy I've chosen. And what does it take to be a follower of God, to recognize God's voice so clearly that you choose to continue to follow this plan that God lays out, even though it doesn't make sense? So I ask you the question I ask myself. How do I hear from God? How do I hear his voice? How do I recognize his presence? His presence is around us, but do we always recognize God's presence? Do we sense it in our midst? Samuel recognized it, followed it, even though it didn't make complete sense. He couldn't say this all adds up. I can explain why God's chosen this person. In fact, just the opposite. Samuel had to trust God fully that this was part of God's plan. This was what God was going to do. This was how God was going to work with Israel. So I ask you today, what are you willing to do for God? What are you willing to listen to God's voice as he speaks to you? What would it take for you to trust God that fully? To let God speak and to instruct you to do something that might not make sense to our human understanding. Prayerfully ask God to show you how to hear his voice and to trust him fully. Guys, there is no right way to get to that place. It's all about a relationship with God. Spend time with God. Seek to recognize his presence in your life. And grow in your trust and faith that God is in control. Until next time.